Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Casey, and here on my channel we talk about personal growth, lifestyle, and personal finance. Today we're going to be talking about the biggest budget mistakes you might be making and how to fix them. So if you're interested in that, just keep watching. If you listen to any personal finance videos, you'll hear that budgeting is super important. It's normally the first thing that people recommend you doing when starting on your personal finance journey. But there's a lot of mistakes you can easily slip into. So today we're going to talk about some of those mistakes and how you can get out of them. So the first one is not making your budget realistic enough. And with this, I'm specifically talking about not leaving any money for fun. So a lot of times when people start budgeting, they cut out all unnecessary expenses. So that might be shopping, going out to eat, hanging out with friends. And where this might sound good initially, it can come back and bite you in the butt. A lot of times what happens is that you do that for a month, maybe 2 months, and then at the end of that time, you feel really bored and kind of drained because you're not doing anything fun. And then you end up spending a whole bunch of money on those things when you could have just factored in a small percentage of that every single month to kind of satiate you instead of you doing this one large spend. So I recommend each month on your budget to factor in a small amount of money that you can use for whatever you want. And this will really help you to stick to your budget in the long term. Number 2 is forgetting irregular expenses. So for this one, I'm talking about things like Amazon Prime, your domain renewal if you have a website or a blog, or just big things that come up once a year that might not be a part of your monthly bills and you might forget. So I did this year and it kind of threw me for a loop. In July, my Amazon Prime came out, which is $119, which is not, a huge amount of money, but when you're not planning to spend $119, when that just automatically comes out of your account, it's a little jarring. So I recommend making a list of all your irregular expenses and then go back on your bank statements or credit card statements and see when those come out each year. Then once you know those dates, you can plan for them moving forward. Number 3 is not tracking your expenses. The way that this can turn into a mistake is if you create a budget without tracking your expenses beforehand, you might be creating an unrealistic budget. So say for example, when you're creating your budget, you allocate $400 for food, but when you look back, you realize that you actually spend somewhere closer to like $600 on food, and maybe there's not much room for you to cut out anything more. So you're already setting yourself up for failure because you didn't create a realistic budget to begin with. So I recommend to look at 3 months of your bank statements and your credit card statements and see what the averages of those categories of expenses are. So looking at, food, transportation, housing, spending money, stuff like that, and see on average how much you spend in those categories for the past 3 months. Then you can use that data to create your budget. And it'll actually make it to where you're more likely to succeed in budgeting because your budget is based on actual data rather than just some arbitrary numbers that you thought of. Number 4 is not changing your budget as life changes. So this is more geared to people who have been budgeting for some time now, and maybe their budget that they originally set is no longer accurate to what their financial life looks like now. Budgeting is a verb, so therefore your budget should always be changing. So say you get a raise, or maybe you don't need to spend as much on gas. Like I know with COVID, I was able to stretch 1 tank of gas for 4 months. So for 4 months, I didn't have to worry about gas, which as someone who usually spends about $150 on gas every month, that's a big amount of money that I can then allocate to other places. But I need to recognize that change and then actively make that change in the budget and allocate those funds elsewhere. So as you're going through time and things change, make sure that your budget is changing with them. Number 5 is not being flexible. So this is similar to number 1, but for this mistake, I'm specifically talking about random miscellaneous things. So this could be a random charge, a random fee, or maybe you have to get something that you normally don't buy, like maybe you need to buy toilet paper or paper towels, and that could really throw off your budget. So I recommend having a category in your budget called unbudgeted or miscellaneous. And this really only pertains to people who do zero-based budgeting. And the way that this will help you is that if you're budgeting to zero every month, but you have no wiggle room for random things that might come up, then those expenses could throw you into the red and you could get overdraft fees or other things like that. So it's really important that you have some money that you allocate to just random things just in case. Number 6 is not utilizing sinking funds. So sinking funds is a way of breaking up larger expenses and saving for them every single month rather than being surprised by a large expense. So for example, we can take Amazon Prime again. So Amazon Prime gets taken out of your account most likely once a year. So when you know when that time is, every month up until then, so my example is mine comes out every July. So starting in January, I can divide $119 by 6 months and save that amount of money every single month leading up to July. And then when July comes around, I have that money already saved in a sinking fund, and I can just transfer it back to my checking account to pay for the Amazon Prime subscription. So sinking funds can be used for a lot of different things. They can be used for vacations, moving, health expenses, maybe your insurance comes out once a year or twice a year, really whatever you want. The purpose is just to be able to save up for large expenses so that they don't throw off your budget the month that they come out. And number 7 is not having an emergency fund. As you probably know, emergency funds are really important. Things happen out of the blue all the time. And if you don't have an emergency fund, you might have to go into debt in order to pay for unexpected life events like a car accident or a medical emergency. So it's really important that you start putting a little bit of money every single month into an emergency fund so that if anything were to happen, you have a stash of money that you can allocate to anything that's unexpected. So this will allow you to have some peace of mind because you know that if anything were to come up, you have a stash of money to go to if you were to need it in an emergency. So there we have it, the budget mistakes that you might be making and how you can fix them. Let me know down in the comments below what you thought about my tips and if you have any other budget mistakes that you thought of as well. Before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!